to really just unleash the super parent within them. And that means stepping into your role as the leader. You're the CEO of your family.
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the figures. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it.
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the figures. That's a comma.
Hi, Janet. Great to see you.
Oh, always good to see you, darling.
I'm so excited to talk to you. And I have a lot of moms and dads out there that have some questions that we're eager to ask you about. So before we get into it, introduce us a bit to your background, where you come from. How did you get into this fascinating career?
Well, can we at least acknowledge that I'm 100 years old? So this career,
No way.
100 years old. I am proud to say I have walked this earth 6 decades. That is crazy. That is crazy. When you get there,
I need to see an ID.
You'll remember we had this conversation, but I'm honestly, anyway, turning 60 is really magical in that there's that moment. First of all, I don't have the urgency that many young families are experiencing. Mine are flown and groans. So we have a lot of time to reflect and what's our purpose now, et cetera, et cetera. And when I reflect back, I'm a huge journaler, have since I think I learned how to write. When I look back, I mean, I've been a teacher, I've been a facilitator, I've worked in HR, I've always worked with people, but I taught for 20 years. And I believe that I've got this weird perspective where I'm always very present with what I'm doing, but I can't help but focus at 30,000 feet. So while I had students in my classroom, I also had parents. And when I look back on everything I've ever done, this being a huge advocate for families and faith and family harmony and just raising the beautiful children of tomorrow, it's been a culmination. It has all roads have led to this moment. And so I feel really, really confident at my competence, which is important. And I've touched a lot of lives. I actually did some math. In my teaching career, I worked in a spaceflight simulator for 14 years of my 20. I've touched over 65,000 kids. So I know a little.
Wow. And the fact that you've been through all of this before us, passed down the wisdom to us parents who are in the beginning of this.
Yes. And so that's the what. That's kind of the who I am. But the why is because there's no book. There's no handbook. I mean, and you and I, when we first met, we got to have this conversation. It's like the hospital with another human being. And you're like, what? Yeah.
Right. I was like, the third day, me and my husband were at home with our little infant. And we were like, how did they trust us? Poor teenagers with a baby. And meanwhile, we're 35.
It's true. And I think the belief is that we're going to figure it out. And amazingly, we do. And yet with every decade, we also see some very different challenges that families face. And every generation will tell you, but my generation was the hardest. My generation was the hardest. And that is probably true. However, I think now with the advent of electronics, social media, this whole world, when our parents were growing up, our worlds were very neighborhood driven. Yeah. Anywhere you could drive, that was your life.
Right. That was your world. I remember this from my childhood. I didn't it's crazy now.
Right. And if you flew someplace, it was special occasion and you were probably relatively affluent. And now, I don't know, I'm here in the US, so your viewers should know that, but you can pop on a plane way easier than you could 40 years ago, way more economically. And you can pop on a computer and I'm talking to you in Israel and I'm here in the US in Indiana. Same day, real time. And that's what our kids are growing up in. So our worlds were this, and their worlds are expansive. Like they can't even understand the scope of what is at their fingertips. So it's a little alarming, and it must be really scary for them in some ways as well. So,
Yes, I have I haven't gotten there totally. I have my son's not even 2 yet, but I have sister with like preteens, and I was talking to friends that have, teenagers now, and I can't imagine being a teen, like a young teen with social media. Oh my gosh. Like, I don't understand how, and it's, even if you put on these restrictions and on YouTube, it's hard to shelter them. So that's something that I want to talk to you about, because I think that's one of the biggest topics right now, or
absolutely.
navigating that young
But
people that are growing up with social media, with access to the internet and social media.
so when you ask like how I got here, that's how I got here, because there's a real gap between what we are expected to do, right? And we hate that word, but expected to do as parents,
Right.
and the information that we have and the experience. Like we don't have a ton of experience to do it. So that's why I went into this field, because family should be fun. This is our legacy. This is the most enjoyable and the most precious gift we've ever been given. So if you're at home going, like tearing your hair out half the time, you're missing out on the joy. And so that's why I do what I do, to bring joy back to it, and maybe just kind of take some of the myth and the mystery out of it a little bit. Anyway.
You mentioned something like going crazy. That's another thing we could talk about, how nowadays we don't have that village too. A lot of like young parents, they don't have the village that we used to have. We used to live next to stuff like grandma and aunties, and even your neighbors were allowed to like tell you what to do. And now everything is so distant. Like I remember my neighbors were friends with my moms, and they could tell me like, get in the house, don't do that. But it's not like that anymore. And a lot of parents, I think they're going crazy and they don't understand why, but it's because we're missing all of those elements that we used to have in the past on top of everything else.
Yes. I will agree with that. And unfortunately, and here's maybe the segue into a topic that everybody wants to talk about. Uh, I will just admit right now to all of your viewers, I troll on Facebook. I use it as a tool to get information, and there's lots of parent groups on there. The data that I will share with you right now is exactly what you just said. There is no village. I actually did a screenshot of a mom who made a post in a parent group, and in 15 hours over 2,000 people commented on her post. That's her village, which is great for a woman or a man, doesn't matter, parent that doesn't want to feel alone. But are you getting good advice? And what happens to your brain when you listen to 2,000, you're sifting through 2,000 pieces of advice that people are giving, because it was like, what should I be doing? And I'm thinking to myself, this poor woman, like, what do you do with all of that?
Wow.
So you're right. And I'll ask the question, I won't make a statement. Is social media where we should be getting sage advice about what to do with something as precious as the human beings that we share our homes with? I'll just ask the question and I'll just let it sit there.
Yeah. And you don't know anything about these people's morals and their backgrounds, and you just and I don't even think our brains are developed to even to accept so many pieces of advice. 2,000 people at once, that's insane, and everybody's probably telling her like different things and leaving her maybe even more confused.
But it was only 15 hours, Cerise.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, in 50, it wasn't even a full 24 hours, and
15
2,000
hours.
people felt compelled to respond. And I just thought, I'm just not old enough to live in this world today.
I'm like, I'm afraid of, honestly, I'm afraid of these parenting groups because when I first had a child, I joined one and it was a bit overwhelming. And I also found people were like shaming other parents and just seeking
Yes.
information. And that's when I said, okay, that's my cue. And I just stick to like friends and family and
Yeah.
not the internet. But I
And
know
that was,
I'm fortunate, but some people don't have that and they feel very alone. So,
well, and some people, let's face it, like they're addicted to like the science behind social media is stinking brilliant. They do everything in their power to get us addicted, and they are very successful. And so some people don't even realize that that is their first default. Like, oh my gosh, this just happened tonight, and now I just feel the need, like, did I do the right thing kind of thing. It's like, come on, whatever. That's just my opinion, but I'm old school.
yeah.
I'm old
That's
school.
that's always strange to me, and I'm like, I'm 35, and I'm like, I grew up with the internet too, but it's still weird when I see people share personal information, especially about their kids on social media. That's weird to me. I'm like, this is the first place to share this private information about your child. You don't have like a friend or something to ask. Maybe
It's
they don't,
very
but
dangerous, and
I
it's
think
very
what you
dangerous.
said, people get too comfortable and share and overshare over the internet.
It's dangerous. You don't know who's watching, and you don't know. Let's put it the other way. It's amazing in this whole cybersecurity land that we live. It's amazing what people can learn from what little information they have. And a lot of it is on the internet. So I would just be very cautious, but that's just me.
Yeah, and like you said, with the most precious things that we have, like our little humans that we're raising. If you want to share your business, that's one thing, but like sharing things about your child and that's another thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Just be cautious. That's all.
What can parents do to help, navigate this world of social media? And how do they shelter their kids or set boundaries from their children from social media?
I'm going to go 30,000 feet because that's where I live, and then I'll come down. I believe that electronics, social media, technology, it's here to stay. We all can agree with that. There's a difference between using technology and having it use you.
Mm,
And so, a lot of what, and I think you and I talked about this, a lot of what I believe in my entire parenting perspective, how in which I approach my coaching is to empower parents to really just unleash the super parent within them. And that means stepping into your role as the leader. You're the CEO of your family. You're the CFO. You're the COO. You are the anything you want to create. We are, as parents, the everything for our kids. So, very simply, if we think about using the tool as it was intended or allowing it to control us, use us, if we say not under my watch, then it's really much simpler. So, when you say to your kids, if they're like, well, I have to do this paper and I'm doing research, got it. I can't, I accept that. And when they're done, or if your door is open and you peek by and they've gotten sidetracked and they're on Facebook or something or Instagram or whatever it is, then that's your job to intervene. So we set the boundaries. I'm a big proponent to boundaries, Cerise. So we put the boundary in place. You get to do, you're on technology for the research. And then maybe you get 30 minutes of whatever social media platform you allow, and then done. phones are by the front door charging for tomorrow. Maybe
Yeah, I
you,
like that
the-
approach.
right? Maybe you've taken the router and you've scrambled it past 9:30 at night, depending upon the age of your kids. I mean, it's just, and that's it, it's up to us to set the parameters and be the leaders in that regard. And if
I
you've
think
got kids old enough, why can't you at an old enough age just say, I love you enough to not let your brain get completely scrambled by the garbage that I see on social media? So you get 30 minutes and you're done. And I make no apologies about it. Turn around and leave the room.
right. And I like how you said if they're old enough to understand, like you can explain that to you can communicate that. And I like how you say you're the leaders because I don't know, I feel like nowadays they kind of take that power away from the parents. Like, there's the whole like gentle parenting. And of course, I'm like all for, giving children freedom to like express themselves and everything. But I feel like sometimes they act like we're just born and we just know everything that's the best for us and we don't need the guidance of adults. And that's something that's weird. Like, what do you think about gentle parenting, about that movement? It's really popular now.
It is popular. And in all, here's my disclaimer. I have not given it enough time to be an expert in it. I see people comment, you saying, according to gentle parenting, you know, and I don't know. I think we're at a time anthropologically, historically, sociologically, you do whatever works. And so if gentle parenting works for you, if that really works and you're getting great results, then use it. What I think I could say if I were to make a generalization about it, it works better with younger kids. And then once they start to really express their personalities and they hit like that tween and they're really trying to show you who they are. And we want to encourage them having a voice and an opinion and all of that. I don't know, like if it still works for you, great. However, it might be time to just consider recruiting some other things because that's where we start to see this. And I don't know that I would want to be a gentle parent with a 16-year-old
Yeah. That's
standing
so
in
funny
front of
that
me,
you say that.
right?
But that's what I hear from my friends. Like some of them like joke with that, like, yeah, that works with toddlers. But say that to my stubborn, like 16-year-old, 15-year-old. They say, yeah, yeah, like wait till you get to my stage. They're like, yeah, it's easy for you to say. But yeah, I'm not a gentle parenting expert either. I just see like the clips and the advice and a lot of it, like, yeah, I agree with it. Some of it I'm like, I don't know how realistic that is, but yeah.
Which is why I would say that's why my generic answer is like you just do what works for you. And if it works, great. But if you try something that is under the heading of whatever kind of parenting you're choosing and it's not working, then don't stay there just because you've chosen this silo or this ideology of, well, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to be doing anything except whatever is in the best interest of the kid. And if that ain't working, then try something else.
Right. I'm like, as long I think gentle is good, like, not hitting your kids or anything like that, no verbal abuse or anything, but just letting them like, lead themselves and like that. I'm like, yeah, that'll probably I like listen to my friends, they're like, yeah, yeah, that'll work until a certain age, and then you gotta like set some boundaries.
Agree.
So I had a question here. Like a lot of people ask me about like discipline and can you be friends with your children? What is your take on that? Like, do you believe that you can be friends while you're raising your kids, or does that come later?
I'm going to answer that in reverse. Disclaimer, my kids are 27 and 31 now. Uh, I would say probably 5 years. So 21, 22. I remember I was out taking a walk. My daughter did not live here. She was out of state, as a matter of fact. And I remember she called me because her time zone was behind me. And she said, I can't talk now. I just walked out of a meeting. I'm going to call you later, but I just needed to tell you, I am so glad that you were never my friend when I was growing up, because I really need you to be a friend now. I'll call you later. Goodbye. Done.
Wow.
Unsolicited, totally unsolicited. She was in her first or second major corporate job after grad school. So I'm not a fan, obviously. I'm not a fan. And here's why. So it's one thing to say, oh, well, that's nice, Janet, but back it up with some evidence. If we subscribe, or if we all agree that the world is, it's challenging. Every culture, every state, every country has its own challenges, but life is challenging. I believe that our job is to make kids feel seen and heard, but ultimately they must feel safe. And I believe, and it's evidence-backed, that strong boundaries is not a punishment. It's a way to make kids feel safe, because they know when they push up against that boundary, they know exactly when too far is too far. And that's in a world that's this big, knowing that they have some semblance of control over what they can understand makes them feel really safe. So I don't know that I call it discipline as much as just have really clear boundaries about what you accept in your household, your right, your wrong, your values. And when those are clearly communicated, it's amazing. Discipline becomes much less of an issue because everyone's on board. And so the friend thing, I don't think you can be friends and a disciplinarian and the enforcer of strong boundaries at the same time. I just don't think it's possible. It dilutes my role as the leader. I can be a collaborative leader. If they're like, well, Mom, I really want to go to this movie. Well, it's rated R here in the States. That means it's probably got some nudity and some profanity in it. Well, tell me why you want to go to that movie, because clearly you're not really old enough to go to the movie. So tell me what you think. Like that's a collaborative, like, is that me being a friend? No, it's me being collaborative and asking good questions.
Yeah, and it's funny because me and my husband were talking about that yesterday, because our son is like, he's really like in the stage where he's like cuddly and sweet now. And then we were just joking, saying like, oh, we'll enjoy this until he's like, preteen, and then we're gonna be lame to him until he's like 21, because that's what was our experience. Like our parents, both of our parents, they weren't our friends while we were teenagers, and we had boundaries, and I'm so grateful for that now. Like your daughter told you, I'm so glad that my mom set boundaries. We didn't get into trouble. We weren't, get into things that we weren't supposed to get into. And then once I was like 21, I came out of the military and everything. And until this day, me and my mom are like, all of us, we're four kids, and we call her all the time. She's like our go-to person.
What's the flip side of that? And my kids would tell you that if they dialed into this call. They always call me the mean mom. They joke about it now. But isn't it funny how I was the mean mom, and yet not so much my daughters, but all of my son's friends hung out at our house. But I was the mean mom. So that told me that the kids felt safe knowing that they were in an environment that, I always threw a snack down, that we had a basement. That was another really good reason. but I always threw food down there. But if I heard them start swearing and dropping the F-bombs and dropping language that I didn't appreciate, I would stand at the top of the steps and say, hey, 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 like, I don't appreciate that language. Knock it off. Close the door. Never went down, shook a finger, like none of that. Just, hey, knock it off, close the door and that was it. And they just kept coming back. They just kept coming back. My basement was the go-to. But it's not like they could just get away with anything. They couldn't get away with a lot, but they felt safe.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of parents need to hear now. Sometimes when some of my friends, I ask my mom, "How did you like my kid is hitting me or like doing things?" And then mom just tell them not to, like tell them to stop, or there'll be some consequence. Take this away from them. I think nowadays, like we try to be so like gentle and like everything is hurting our children's freedom and boundaries, but you like hitting you shouldn't a kid shouldn't be hitting you and then he'll think it's okay to hit kids, outside of the house as well.
Is
Sometimes
that
they
really a
overcome.
thing?
Yeah.
That's really a thing. Oh my
Yes.
God.
Here.
Well, and let's remember also, we're role models, right? That's one of our biggest jobs. I mean, hats, hundreds of hats that we wear. I'm just going to ask the question. There's no judgment. What is the message that you send to anybody, spouse, friend, child, when they hit you and that's okay? I would just ask, what's the message that you're sending? Because sometimes it's not what we say, it's what we do. And so what is the message that you send when you do nothing? I'll just let that sit there.
That's
If
a
I was,
good question.
if that was my daughter, especially my daughter, I would want to teach her that as a woman, I value myself enough to never let another human being do that to me. That would just be my message to my daughter. And so if it's not okay with me, it should never be okay for you either. I don't care whether you're 4, 14, or 40. Nobody should ever hit you. And if they learn that at 4 and they internalize that, then I've checked that box.
Wow, that's actually deeper than what I even thought, and that's beautiful, and it's true. That's a message for her as well, that no one should ever accept that.
And I think and so that's where I think this is at the core of why even these discussions are so necessary right now, is because lives have become they've always were. It's really hard when you're in the weeds, when you're in the thick of it. If you're having a day with your son and it's like 7 o'clock at night and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this day, right? Like, it's really hard to think about 10 years from now, but that's what leadership is.
Mm.
A good CEO has their vision about what's coming next. And everything we do in the home, again, whether it's at 4 months, 4 years, 14, is a vision for what's coming up. We have to always keep that in mind, even when you're in the weeds. It's like, well, if I say yes to this now, what's going to happen, blah, blah, down the road. So
Wow.
I would encourage more contemporary parents not to adopt a leadership mindset, and a great CEO, his or her charge is to keep the vision of the organization always in mind.
Wow, that's powerful. I'm gonna remember that. But that's true. Like we're leaders, we're like the CEOs of our families, and we always need to think ahead. What am I doing now? What are the consequences going to be to my actions now in the future? Because we're shaping it.
Here's 2 really quick examples that would illustrate that point. If anyone's like, well, that's great for you, Janet, but what does that really mean? Translate that. When my daughter was, I don't know, 2, here, do you guys have McDonald's?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't do fast food. I'm kind of a food snob, however, especially when it comes to crap food. But
Yeah.
McDonald's came up with this playscape concept, and it was new back in the day, like, 20 whatever years ago. And so it was a great place to go take kids to go burn off some. We have winter here. And so it was a great place to just go and let them burn off some steam because this playscape was gigantic. And my daughter, so maybe once a month or whatever it was, I would let her, um, I would bribe her when we went. I did. I bribed her. I was like, you can have a Happy Meal if you order it yourself.
Mm.
She was so painfully shy. She would stand up at the line. Now, of course, it's in the middle of the day, right after preschool. So it's not like there's 20 people in line. And she would stand there and I would be like, if you want to eat, you have to order. She was 2. And until she said hamburger, pickle, ketchup only, she didn't eat. We would step out of line and head to the door. And she'd cry. And I'd be like, you got to use your words. Fast forward, I made both kids participate in here. We called them oratorical, otherwise like a speech contest, right? It was done every year. And I made them, it was a non-negotiable. It was totally voluntary. But I said, in the Krebs household, this is a non-negotiable. You will participate. Mom, we're scared. I get it. But in the world, you need to know how to communicate. You need to be able to write your thoughts on paper. And if you have an opportunity where you have an audience, whether it's a small audience or a large audience, you need to be able to communicate effectively.
Oh,
They hated me, but they are masters in their current positions, and their ability to speak and command an audience or be heard is unbelievable. So there you have it.
wow, I love those examples, and especially the making them from a young age be able to, like, at 2, you were, like, encouraging her to, like, speak up and ask for what she wants, make her own order, and wow, these are really good tips. I'm, like, listening, I'm like, "Okay, noted." But I think that's so important, like, to know how to communicate and write your thoughts, and that's something that I think also, unfortunately, with social media and, like, when you have
Oh,
tweets and
yeah.
it's really hurting our, communication and writing but that's a whole other whole other topic,
The
but
interesting thing is, so we can so this mental health, everyone talking about the mental health crisis, right? The mental health
right.
crisis. Like, well, everyone's talking about, it, but no one's coming up with solutions. You know, the number one concern of parents in regard to the mental health crises is that their kids, that when the kids are asked, they don't feel seen or heard. That's really solvable, Cerise.
Right.
And so when we give our kids voice, as I just illustrated, whether it's formally on a stage or at a fast food restaurant or in any restaurant, ordering for yourself, that's really empowering. And I can promise you, empowered kids I won't say don't have, empowered kids have less mental health issues because that empowerment is their fire. Their soul is alive.
Wow. I love that.
So voice is just hugely important, and I believe it's part of the solution to this mental health crisis that everyone's talking about, but no one's solving.
And like you said, that's so achievable. It doesn't take any, like, expensive therapy or meds. If you could just start with those steps right there, that could get you at least, a step ahead.
Here's one for all of the viewers. If you've got school age kids, and this is going to be a very strong statement. So alert. Abolish the question, how was school?
Mm,
The worst question that has ever been, or how was your day? The worst question, because you know what the answer is.
okay. Fine.
Right. And that's it. So in my house, fine and and good, those were 2 words that they weren't allowed to use. And I never asked that question anyway, but I just abolished those words. So stop asking. Well, let's say it positively. Start asking more subjective questions. Allow kids to expand and practice using their voice, being heard. It's so simple.
Wow, you've
Open
already
Open-ended questions is one way to get at least a kickstart to this mental health crisis.
Thank you so much. This is really good. Shift over to mothers because this is another big thing. Like mothers feel so overwhelmed. And can you give us any advice how to find, is it possible to have work-life balance and the whole self-care thing? Like, what does that look like for a mom who has a job or running a business and has children or a spouse and wants to have time to drink more water and shower? What does that look like?
Well, I believe that if I had known we were going to talk about this, I would have made I made a graphic. Here, I'm going to make one. And I believe that is like, let's acknowledge and give ourselves some grace.
Gross. That's the
It's
best word.
hard. It's hard. It's hard to do it all. It's hard if you're a single parent, like it's all on you, divorced, whatever it is. It's hard with a partner that is supportive because everyone's going in 100 different directions. The whole work-life balance thing implies a silo of two things: work, life, and everything. Like I just think that's a myth. And so here's my little graphic. I'm just gonna here. For me, it's 3, and that's a peace sign. So it's work, life, and you. And when you include all of those, then you get peace. Like that's a peace sign. That's, I think, pretty universal, right? You can see that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So work, life, you. If you don't put the you piece in the equation, there is no peace. And if there is no peace, if there's no you can't you hear this all the time. You can't give from an empty bucket. Now, does your you time, does your self-care require 6 hours a week? It might not, especially depending upon where you are in the stage of parenting. I remember Ben loved when I worked out when he was a baby because I would put him on my feet and I would swing him around, like do windshield wipers or do leg lifts with him. He thought it was fantastic. Or I would put him on my belly if I was doing hip thrusts or something. Like there's ways to kind of do things. There's also kids go to bed early. So you may have to shift when you get things done. And maybe your self-care is, I would just be delighted to read a book for 20 minutes tonight before I go to bed with nobody up my you-know-what for once in my day, right? So
Right.
it changes. But the good news is it's not, you're going to get it back because they're going to grow up and they're going to need you less and less. And you'll be able to, go and get a massage or whatever it is that lights your fire. Those days are coming. So take advantage of little pockets of time, resources. Maybe money's an issue. So you can't do that. So maybe going to the library where you can let the kid go to daycare so you can go participate in the book club, like whatever, be creative. It might not be what you're used to, but find something that works for you. Meditation, journaling, reading. It might just look a little bit different, but you know what it's not? Sitting on your phone for 30 minutes and
Mm.
scrolling while you tell your child to get off of the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. Lead by example.
Right. Right. So I don't know that there's, striving for this balance. What's the point? Sometimes we're off balance, but keep yourself a part of the equation so that you don't feel like you're completely losing yourself because it's not going to last forever.
Being yourself a part of the And since I've been talking to like several moms right now these past interviews, and like now it's when they have kids, young kids, and they're building businesses, it might just be taking a long hot shower or taking a walk, or like you said, just doing some journaling, and it fills them and makes them feel good. And that's what self-care can be. We can just give ourselves grace and do whatever our time, our pockets allow us. That's what I'm getting from it. And it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. We have to be willing to kind of just pivot to whatever is available. And so I have always loved this word, like, and I shouldn't say try. I do live with intention. And so I would say in that answer, just be super intentional about finding something that works for you. Don't walk around the house going, oh, I wish I could. I wish I could. Focus on what you can.
Mm.
Like, I can't do that, but I can do this. Oh, my child's at the sitter. Like, I've got an hour before I have to go pick him or her up from daycare, or I've made a play date. So while that's the case, I'm going to go do something else. Like, be intentional about putting yourself in the equation and it'll happen.
Yeah,
And
it
if it
took me
doesn't, yeah,
it took me like 6 months to figure that out, because I was just I don't know, like mourning like the what I could do in the past, and then I'm like, why am I stuck on what I could do? So I had to like shift my mindset, and
yeah.
it took me a while. Like I was like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that, and I can't.
'Cause we all take, because it takes us a minute to accept the fact that our lives have absolutely been turned upside down by this 8-pound human. Like, nothing is ever going to be the same again. So some women probably go through a bit of mourning, MOURN, right? It's like, oh my God, the life I used to have. I used to be able to fit into my clothes. I used to be able to wear my high heels. I used to have an hour to get ready in the morning. Blah, 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 blah,
Right.
blah.
All of
Okay.
that.
So now you're mourning, right? You're like, you lament about the life that you had. And it takes a minute to get to adjust to like this new life. You used to be able to go out of the house looking really sharp, and now you're lucky to have a sweatshirt on that doesn't have spit on it to go to the mailbox, for crying out loud. So
Yeah, those are the things that I wasn't warned about, like how hard it would be to get out the house. Just have grace and do what you can, but I've gotten a lot better. I just
it's-
focus on what I
yeah,
can do.
it's
I
grace.
can
It's just giving yourself some grace.
and I like how you're so intentional with your words. You'll say, I'll say it in a positive way. That's something that I'm working on too.
But like I said, I'm 100 years old, and words matter, and whether it's in the home or whatever. And I believe that your listeners appreciate, having like it, intentional language. Clearly, I made my daughter do this at the age of 2. So language has always been a priority for me. I think it's important. It's the one thing that we can always fall back on, is our ability to communicate our thoughts and our feelings. So
Yeah. What is the one piece of advice you can give us, like just to bring everything home before we close this episode out?
I think we've said it a couple of times. Give yourself some grace. You're going to screw up a lot, and none of it is going to absolutely be a game changer, as long as you're just aware and you just re-engineer it. And it's like, oh, that didn't really work out so well. I think next time I'll try something else. Like, you're not expected to just get it right all the time. So remove that cloak of perfection and put on the cloak of grace. It looks so much prettier on you anyway.
Oh, that
It's
remove the
all going to
cloak
work
of
out.
perfection. Thank you so much. Well, can you tell us where we can connect with you, where we can find you? And you have a book coming out, don't you?
I do. Thank you. And
Yeah.
I'm actually, right after this call, I'm going to be talking with my editor. We're just putting some final pieces to it, which actually your listeners will love, because it's about leadership in the parenting in the home. And in the meantime, I'll let you know when that is out. It'll be on Amazon. It'll be everywhere. It'll be super cheap too, because it's like a handbook. So that'll be really fun. I'm so excited to get it done. And in the meantime, I'm all about shifts, right? So a lot of what we've talked about are mindset shifts, behavior shifts. And so the fun little freebie that I can offer everybody, if you just go to Parent Shifts with an S, parentshifts.com, there's a really cute little brochure about things that you thought you were supposed to do, and maybe you could try it this way. So
Wow, I
just
love that.
a downloadable little PDF that everybody would, I guarantee you get at least one like, oh, thanks. So because it's free, you might as well just download it and do it.
Right? Right. Everyone download that. And your social media handles, Janet Krebs.
Yeah, my name is I just use it. I use Parent Shifts simply because it helps you remember that that's what that
Right.
particular PDF is all about. But I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and I guess Instagram. And I'm trying to get my YouTube back up and running so that, because I actually release videos for all of your parents on Mondays and Thursdays.
Yeah, on Facebook.
On Facebook and on Thursdays, I have been known to slide into Bubby J. And if you are of the Yiddish, Bubby is
Right.
Yiddish or grandmother. And even though I'm not one, my alter ego is Bubby J for Janet. So sometimes I become Bubby J and I'll give you a Bubby J tip. They're just fun. So yeah, I invite everybody just, to follow and engage, right? Like just ask questions. I'm really good about responding. If you just respond and reach out, I'm happy to connect with you and help out any way I can. Because as I always say, we are all raising tomorrow together.
Wow, I love that. Wow, well, that's how we're going to wrap it up with that right there. Thank you so much, Janet. And good luck with your book release. And I wish you health and prosperity. And thank you. I hope we talk
Well,
again. I
thank
hope to
you.
have you on this podcast again.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Anytime.
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the figures. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it, get it.
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and